Howdy, howdy, howdy. Valentine's Day is coming up, and a little sooner than I expected. For some reason, I just kind of, someone was talking about it, and I was, like, guess it's coming up. And I wanted to share some thoughts, kind of as it relates to the season, and yeah. So today we're gonna talk about some things, especially as it relates to love. So these are going to be my Valentine's Day thoughts, if you will. And we're going to look primarily at love, godly love. So let's just jump into it. 1 Corinthians 13, we're going to look at godly love, which is translated here in this chapter as charity, that agape love you've probably heard of. And we're going to look at the value of godly love. So first, just verses 1 and 2. Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, and have not charity, I am become as sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy, and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith, so that I could remove mountains, and have not charity, I am nothing. Right? So first we just see, the value of charity, godly love. It's above miraculous and heavenly power and gifts, right? If you don't have it, then those other things, it goes hand in hand, right? Those things are nothing. They're empty, right? It's just the value of godly love is more than those things on their own. And again, let's keep going. Verse 3, and though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, and have not charity, it profiteth me nothing, right? Profits me nothing. The value of godly love is above good deeds and sacrifice. Or you could, again, just say, those things are empty without love. It's like what Jesus was talking about, how the Pharisees, those hypocrites, scribes and Pharisees, how they do these tithes of mint and anise and cumin, and they left off the weightier matters of the law. Jesus said, like judgment and love, mercy. I think it was those three. I have to double check. That was off from memory. But the point is, he says these things ought you to have done, and not to leave the other undone, right? These are good things, but the weightier matter is godly love, right? That's so valuable. So you have to so we see its importance, right? So we know it's important. What is it exactly, right? So let's look at the character of godly love, right? So just continuing on verse 4, right? What is godly love? Charity suffereth long, okay? It's patient, that's often when we see suffereth long, right? We don't use long suffering very often in our modern vocabulary, but so often say, that's like patience, right? It's kind, self-explanatory maybe. Charity envieth not, right? It doesn't look to what others have, it doesn't look for attention. It's not trying to make a show, put itself on display, right? And that kind of goes with the next part, actually. Charity envieth not, right? Doesn't look to what others have. And then those other things, vaunteth not itself, right? Vaunts not itself. That's kind of what those things were speaking more. If you look at the word, it's like the idea of boasting, right? So that's where it doesn't look for attention, isn't trying to make a show, put itself on display, right? It's not boasting. It's not, here, look what I'm doing, and is not puffed up. And that's simply, it's not proud, but is humble, right? Godly love has humility behind it. Verse 5, just keep going. doth not behave itself unseemly. All right, it acts appropriately. Right? I guess you can just simply boil that down to it seeketh not her own. It's selfless, right? Acts appropriately, becomingly, is selfless. It's not looking for its own. Is not easily provoked. Now this one's interesting. What does it exactly mean by not easily provoked? When I was looking at this word, there was the ideas in the, behind the word of like sharpen to like it's sharp to sharpen. It was interesting, and I was trying to think of kind of like what it's saying here, and then I was thinking, right, we know what it means in today's vocabulary, to be sharp with someone, or when someone is sharp towards us. So if you just think of gentleness, right? What's the opposite of like being sharp with someone? It's being gentle. So it's not easily provoked, but it's gentle. More than just like patient again, for not easily provoked. It's more than like it's patient, but it's gentle too. Not sharp, but gentle. So that's where that went. And then thinketh no evil. Now this is an interesting phrase as well, right? You'll see other translations where it's like has no record of wrong, has no account of evil, because the word thinketh there, or thinks, is basically that's what they have in the King James, but the word behind it is kind of like this accounting term, refers to reality or whatever. But I think the interesting part about this is the evil. Often when we see like evil in the Bible, and as I've read, it's not like it's really referring to evil as in wickedness all the time. It does sometimes, but not always. Like, when God talks about how he's going to bring such evil upon Israel because of, their wickedness and what they've done, is like, I'm going to bring such evil upon you. It's not exactly like that evil is wickedness as much as often it speaks to trouble, right? Tribulation, troubles, just bad circumstances and stuff, right? Struggles. So when you put it all together, and I do like the word thinks here, it's more than just some record, but because it's easy to say, all right, well, I'm not going to keep this account, this record of this person did this thing wrong or whatever, but that's like sometimes, you're not even going to let it be in your mind, right? You're not even going to have it be in your thoughts. And so I think that paints a more beautiful, maybe more accurate picture of godly love. But again, it's not even as much as wickedness, but as I was putting this together, it's godly love is not concerned with past troubles. It's not consumed with struggle. It's not worried or anxious, if you want to boil it down maybe to something more broad, It's not worried, anxious. It doesn't say, woe is me. It's not pessimistic. It's not focused on circumstances. I think you can reasonably draw those conclusions out of that phrase. And I thought that was interesting, because often, it's like thinking of, it doesn't think, oh, that this person's going to do wickedness. It doesn't have that, like, I forget the way, like, pastor will say it, but, that sort of mentality where you're just, like, you constantly think it's going to go wrong or whatever. It's always doomed. But it's more than that. I think it speaks to just even being concerned about circumstances too. But moving forward, right? Rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in the truth. Now this one's interesting because I actually had to think about this one day. I was writing these verses on the whiteboard in school, and one day, and this kid came up to me and asked about this verse here, rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in the truth. And, so I had to think about, okay, what he was asking, what is it saying? So I had to think about, what is it saying, right? It rejoices not in iniquity. Well, so I had some thoughts, right? Godly love loves the truth and has joy in it, and as opposed to sin, iniquity, wickedness. Now that might sound obvious, right? It's just kind of what it says, but maybe love does not get joy in sin. If I have godly love, I'm not going to be happy about disobeying God. I'm not going to have joy. I'm not going to joy over doing wrong to him or others, right? Instead, I rejoice in what is true, honest, and right. And truth is just, in that verse, it's kind of contrasted against iniquity, as if like the antithesis of truth is iniquity. And we see that in today's world, right? People like to say, my truth, this, that. They're moving away from, no, this is the truth, objective truth. And I think we see just that application today, that godly love is not going to put up with that, really. But let's move on. So verse 7, beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. It bears all things. This was also an interesting one, right? Because in mind, it already has endures all things in there, right? So I wasn't going to I was looking as like, well, I wonder what it's really saying by bears all things, because I would think that'd be similar to enduring. But it was really interesting, the word behind this one had this idea of to cover, to conceal, forbear as well. And so it was really interesting as I was trying to wrap my head around this, right? It's like, okay, what's with this word here? Bears all things, forbear, covering and concealing is like kind of these other meanings or these more common meanings of it. And so I was like, okay, so right, because sometimes it's like, if trying to find out what it is, what does it not mean then? That means it's, if this word could also be saying cover, then that means it's not going to uncover, right? Godly love does not uncover. It's not going to reveal things, uncover things. And then I realized it seeks betterment, not shame, is the idea I had there, right? It's not going to sit there and it's blaze about things, I imagine this kind of like you having a conversation, someone's telling you about like their faults or something's going wrong, it's not going to sit there and be like, that's it. And then you go and says, I'm going to tell these guys like, man, here's what this person did. It's not going to seek the shame, but rather betterment of that person. So that was the idea I had there. Believeth all things, believes all things. I think because, this is probably the best spot where you can say godly love has trust, right? I think that's as simple as we can be about it. It has great trust. And when we see this verse, right, it's like all things, and is it some level of exaggeration to highlight the importance of these characteristics, or is it somewhat speaking, is it really saying, like all things? Because you read this verse and you're like, wow, does that seem extreme? It's like, you might think, oh, it's foolish to just always believe things, all things, and just always having like that trust of someone. But then I was thinking, right, of course, we struggle with trust, because we know that we're faulty. We struggle with trust in our relationships because we know it's just, we're prone to fail. And who knows that more than God? But just think about and how much he gives us opportunity after opportunity after opportunity, chance after chance towards us, right? It's like we mess up, And he's like, okay, I'm going to give you another chance. Here's another chance. Get back up, right? You fall, get back up again, all right? You're going to try again, right? And that's what God does for us. Now, we do read, especially in the Old Testament too, and there's just those times with like the nation of Israel, and it's like, okay, I've given you these chances. I've sent these prophets. I'm going to give you some chastening. I'm going to give you some judgment, at some point. But still it stands like, but if you turn, there's still that opportunity. And so I think that's what we see in a godly love. I mean, just think about how amazing that is. And if we have that in our relationships where it's like, I'm going to trust you again. I'm just going to keep choosing to trust you again. And I think that's where you see how that godly love can really have an impact in someone's life. So let's keep moving forward before I get too long. Hope with all things. Just think about our hope, right? Keeps the end goal in sight. It focuses on eternity. It's not, keeps the end goal. It's not worried about like the here and now, not wrapped up in it. Kind of like with thinketh no evil. It hopes all things. End goal in sight. Endures all things. I think we understand that, right? It's an investment. It's not, this isn't going to be a short matter. It's in it for the long haul, the long run, marathon over sprint. You've probably heard, right? It's about endurance, not in a relationship, this godly love. And then verse 8, and then this kind of goes down through 12. Charity never fails. But whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. What's it saying here, right? Prophecies fail. That was the first one that stuck out to me. Like, what does it mean by prophecies failing, right? Especially if we're talking about gifts of prophecy. Does God fail? No. So just keep reading. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away, right? It's speaking about a completeness, right? When we had the prophecies of the Messiah, in Isaiah and whatnot, it's these prophecies or other prophecies, here's these certain parts, here's these certain specific details. But then when the time comes, you don't need to rely on, here's the prophecy, it's right there in front of us, okay? Now I have, okay, here's the Gospels, here's Jesus right before me, I'm not just relying on this part, this here with Isaiah, this here with Psalms, this here with Deuteronomy, this here, and you can go on in Genesis. And so it's more of this idea of completeness, when it says prophecies will fail, it's just the time will come when it's not going to just be this piece of it. Now we're literally going to see the full picture, right? And we don't need to rely on this piece, but now it's done away, right? And we'll just keep reading. When I was a child, I spake as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. It's the same idea here. It's the maturity, right? You have the lessons as a child and all these things, and then Paul says, when I became a man, right? Then I had the depth, I had the complexity, I had the completeness of all those things that I was trained up in, or at least that's now where I'm at, is more than just here's the foundation and here's the parts. Now we're maturing, now we're building on it, depth, complexity, breadth, right? For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know, even as also I am known. And I've kind of said all these things, but as I wrote, charity has eternal weight. It is complete it's binding, it is mature, right? Because that it says these things for prophecies, tongues, knowledge, whatever, but charity never fails. Godly love now it has that eternal weight. It's not temporary, it's going to be complete, it's mature, right? And finally, verse 13, godly love abides. It's greater than anything else. Now abideth faith, hope, charity, these three, but the greatest of these is charity. Greater than anything else, godly love abides. That has the impact, right? So that's the character of godly love, the value of it. But now we're going to keep moving forward. 1 John chapter 4, we're going to look at the application sort of love, of godly love, the logical application, right? So starting in verse 7, beloved, let us love one another. For love is of God, and everyone that loveth is born of God and knoweth God. He that loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love, right? Just those first two verses. Loving one another is an application of love. It shows God and the knowledge of Him amongst believers, right? And then keep going. Verse 9, in this was manifested the love of God toward us, because that God sent His only begotten Son into the world that we might live through Him. Herein is love, not that we love God, but that He loved us and sent His Son to be the propitiation for our sins. What do we see here? Manifested. Love is demonstrated. It's actionable. It promotes life, right? Send His Son into the world that we might live through Him. It is not hinged upon worthiness, right? Not that we love God, but that He loved us. It's not hinged upon worthiness, but it does highlight, however, worth. It was the worth that we had in God's eyes that He demonstrated and manifested. He showed the love He had toward us. Verse 11, beloved, if God so loved us, we ought also to love one another. Keeping it simple, God's love toward us is the motivator of our love towards one another. And now we're just going to go through real quick here, verses 12 through 16. No man hath seen God at any time. If we love one another, God dwelleth in us, and His love is perfected in us. Hereby know we that we dwell in Him, and He in us, because He hath given us of His Spirit. And we have seen and do testify that the Father sent the Son to be the Savior of the world. Whosoever shall confess that Jesus is the Son of God, God dwelleth in Him, and He in God. And we have known and believed the love that God hath to us. God is love, and he that dwelleth in love, dwelleth in God, and God in him. I just kept this one really simple for all that. The application of love, godly love, it demonstrates the unseen. And we'll come back. Just keep going. Verse 17. Herein is our love made perfect, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment, because as He is, so are we in the world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casteth out fear, because fear hath torment. He that feareth is not made perfect in love, or complete. Maybe you can have the idea. What I see here is love has boldness, right? It initiates. We already saw some of that earlier. It takes out fear. If fear opposes faith, then love strengthens faith, right? Very simple, verse 19. We love Him because He first loved us. Right? We already looked at that, but love takes the first step. And then finally, if a man say, I love God, and hateth his brother, he is a liar. For he that loveth not his brother whom he hath seen, how can he love God whom he hath not seen? And we kind of looked at that already as far as the, demonstrating the unseen. And this commandment have we from Him, that he loveth God, love his brother also. And so just thoughts there. Hatred opposes love. And some of this sounds kind of obvious, right? Love and hate found in someone is hypocrisy. Hate towards anyone is just unreasonable, illogical too, we see. And it spits in the face of God's love. But we're not done quite yet in 1 John. Now we're going to look at chapter 5, just continuing down verse 1. And as a first thought, right? Love toward the brethren is a command, and love has obedience. Whosoever believeth that Jesus is the Christ is born of God, and every one that loveth him that begat loveth him also that is begotten of him. By this we know that we love the children of God, when we love God and keep his commandments. Right? For this is the love of God, that we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous. So love, firstly, towards God is also an extension of love to brothers and sisters in Christ. God's love initiated a relationship with us. So with that in mind, I'm going to have my final Valentine's Day thoughts. I was just thought, I'm going to look at these passages that sort of speak to love, and we're going to go to a lesser spoken of passage, Song of Solomon. Right? This one's not, talked about a lot, but as much as we believe, it's here in the Word of God for our learning, and this one's kind of tells about navigating a relationship. It's kind of got that poetic language, and I'm not going to dive into like reading the whole thing, but we're just kind of do a quick glancing over some thoughts as much as I've heard. And if you want another reference for this, I remember going through this with my dad, and he shared this little video series by like Tommy Nelson on the Song of Solomon, and so there's going to be some thoughts that kind of picked up from there, some things I've heard. But yeah, so I did a quick glance over this when I was taking my notes, and I just simple thoughts, keeping it easy, keeping it broad. Verse 1, Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for thy love is better than wine. And I mean, that's just how it starts, but like going throughout the song, we're just going to simply see love is highly valued in a relationship. All right, we just looked at what godly love is. If you have a relationship without godly love, there's a problem. Godly love is highly valued and highly necessary for a godly relationship, right? If you're not going to have godly love, then you're going to struggle to have a godly relationship. I don't know how to explain it more than that. And it's just more valuable too than anything else, especially, wine, physical things, whatever other thing you think is important in a relationship. If it doesn't have charity, you're going to have problems. And then we can just skim through, as I read, right? Eyes only for your partner. And there's some thoughts about like, okay, here's like the one lover, the guy and the girl, and they're like kind of getting to know each other, and really, I think just keeping it broad, just in today's world, right? It's so messed up. People, it's like they window shop their relationships, or like they're just scrolling. It's literally like, I'm gonna grab this. It's really like objects. They're just treating relationships like, here's this thing I'm kind of interested in, but there's no commitment. It's like, it kind of pleases me for a time, I like it for a time, and then, when I don't like it anymore, I'm just gonna, toss that item aside, go shopping for another relationship, and it's sad, honestly, but really it shouldn't be that way, especially with the marriage relationship. it's eyes only for your partner. Is just the way I'm going to simplify that. You see there's restraint in a relationship, and it's a little weird, a little hard to see in some of the language, but like that's chapter 2, 7, 3, 5. You see, I think Tommy Nelson says like the guy, but you by both parties there should be restraint and boundaries, especially before marriage, right? You're not gonna remember the design of God. And I did a video, right, on, because someone asked the question, what are my thoughts on sexual intercourse, right? And I did a video, and it really just comes back down to the design of God is that sex is after marriage, right? Not before, and so when it comes to relationships, dating, courting, you're building a relationship, there needs to be boundaries, there needs to be restraint there. You're not going to put yourself in a sticky situation, and that's just simply how it should be. And then, just continuing along with that thought, right? Intimacy is a gift of God after marriage that sexual impurity taints. You look through these, I think by chapter 4, people say, like, this is, they're married now or whatever, and like, then you have that language there, and isn't, you just see again, intimacy is supposed to be reserved for after marriage, like the bride, she's kept herself pure, right? And some people, because it's an interesting book in the Bible, they'll compare, okay, Song of Solomon can be like a picture of Christ's love for the church, or Christ as the bride, or the church as the bride of Christ, Christ as the bridegroom. Again, it's, if you want to relate it that way, right? Eyes only for Christ. He needs to be the head. He needs to be first in life. And then the other thing, keep yourself pure for the Lord, right? And then you like see chapter 5, people like, this is like the couple's first like argument or whatever. And I think the simple thoughts here, because at the end of it, the bride's like, the wife still talks good about her husband in the end, like she's looking, anyways. You just see there's no disagreement or argument that is to ultimately create a schism in a good relationship, right? And what am I really extending this to? Divorce is not the design of God. Just come back to that again. The design of God. Divorce is not the design of God, and it should never come into the picture in a godly relationship, right? And the truth is there's going to be struggles, right? As long as we're in this flesh, as long as we're, faulty, as long as we're in this world that's broken, there's going to be struggles. There's going to be, things that go wrong, and, still need to, I had a train of thought there. Right, there's going to be struggles. It's not going to be perfect, but it shouldn't be something that should ever just tear apart the relationship. Just again, go back to it, right? Divorce is not the design of God. In a godly relationship, then it shouldn't even come into the picture. No matter, what struggle it is, you're going to have to find a way to have unity again, and it shouldn't be hard if you love the Lord first, right? It might be hard, but it still should be feasible by God's strength and power. We can keep going, or we could talk about that for a while. But anyways, 6 and 7, just skim through, but I just keeping it, easy, that the love for one another should endure and last and not fade away, you just see again. Which goes back to the character of godly love, right? It endures, it's in it for the long run, it's not gonna, fail, it's not gonna fade away, it's not partial, right, in parts, but it's complete. And, you're just not gonna let time wear away and destroy a relationship. But, in a godly relationship, there's godly love, and that, will last, right? And that's the design of God. And then chapter 8, this is where, people say, like, this is where they have, like, a daughter, right, a little one, and it's kind of like it has her voice. And then you have, like, the parents, who are the lovers at the beginning. And, ultimately, now it comes down to, in a relationship, just navigating a relationship, eventually come parenthood, right? You should be a responsible parent. Protect your children, wait for the right timing of things, and make sure they have good relationships. Are some of the thoughts I drew there. There's a lot of poetic language, but I know this is a book that's talked about a lot, and I'm sure I kept it very, very broad, just like my thoughts as I brushed over real quick, did a quick review. But also, as I've heard, if you're looking for something, there's that video series by Tommy Nelson. But as it comes that season and you're thinking about, like, relationships, this is kind of like the book that goes through that. So again, it's kind of become hard to understand, what is it saying, and what are all these objects they're saying, flagons and apples, and you know what I'm saying. So it might just even be hard to, like, understand the language of it too. And there's also some things, but yeah, I mean, those were my thoughts, really. Just remember in this season to keep the idea of godly love in mind, and remember, just rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in the truth. This is it's a sad state, in our world, where it's just so many young people, right? This is where I, like, really wanted to get a message out, right? It's like, this is where so many young people, high schoolers, even middle schoolers, they're going off, they're doing things that aren't the design of God, right? Having sexual immorality, and I mean, this is where we need to be able to say, hey, that's not the right way of doing things. Here's the right way, right? And here's what a good relationship has. Here's what good love is, right? Because everyone talks about love a lot in this world, but we need to remember, we have to define, what is right love, what is godly love, right? And because the word love is thrown around all the time, so, and it can have all these different meanings. Well, here's what the Bible says about godly love, and we need to stand upon that.